So I'm actually a bit late to doing this review because not only did I end up playing through Metroid Prime on normal mode, but I also ended up going through it on hard mode off camera, and my God, what an amazing game. So the way I structure these reviews is we're gonna go through the story, the gameplay, the graphics, the sound design, the replayability before we talk about my final verdict score. With that said, the story isn't really in your face in Metroid Prime or any Metroid game. Like, you'll get a few cutscenes, but generally speaking, you'll have to scan enemies and the environment to piece together the lore and what's currently happening. Most enemies you face early on are going to be hostile creatures from the planet, but as you explore further, you start facing more corrupt species that have been genetically enhanced or augmented to stop you. There's some really interesting lore if you want to find it. Otherwise, it'll just stay in the background. So moving on to gameplay, let's talk about exploration first. So like I said, the game doesn't shove the story in your face, but it doesn't really tell you the right way to go either. Oftentimes you'll be forced to explore every room you can, scanning everything you can until you find that one spot you're supposed to destroy or scan a computer to open a door. Some people might find this annoying, but to all of us hardcore Metroid fans, that is a Metroid game. In a way, it encourages you to pay attention to things in the environment and makes you interested in knowing more about it. And then suddenly you realize that you're invested in the lore and the story. See, by forcing me to scan everything to figure out where to go, I just naturally find myself reading up on the lore just because it's so well written. Metroid Prime is unashamed of what it is, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Now, this is a remaster, and the world geometry remains mostly untouched, but the controls are way tighter than the original. You can perform most major actions with the trigger buttons, which means that you can have both thumbs on both joysticks 90% of the time. Like, the only times you need to take your thumb off the joystick is when solving environmental puzzles or swapping weapons, which can get pretty intense during fights, but I think that that's intentional. Because of the high level of immersion in the game, it almost feels like Samus herself is struggling to try and change her weapons in the middle of a battle with slight consequences. But the most appealing part of any Metroid game is the progression. So the game loop is, as you slowly go through the game, fighting bosses and enemies and so on and so forth, you'll get upgrades that make both combat and exploration more enjoyable. Like a double jump or super missiles to blow up walls or power bombs, and all of these can be used effectively during fights, but is also going to be required for a lot of puzzles. The environmental puzzles usually just have either more health or more ammo capacity as an upgrade, but there's something very cathartic about just seeing numbers go up. And it also happens to be one of the best looking games on the Nintendo Switch. Seriously, I don't know how they got it to look this good and run at a solid 60 frames. I think it's because with the way that Metroid Prime is designed, you're exploring one room at a time, and so a lot of care and detail can be crammed into each room since the Switch only has to load one room at a time. Like the glow that lava emits, or even the Phazon later on, is just, it looks so good. Sound design has also had quite the overhaul, but in a much more subtle way. So the game already sounded great on the GameCube, and here it sounds great as well. The music matches the weird alien environment and often will be off tempo or have some very chaotic instrumentation. But overall, it does feel like it's been remastered and is less crunchy than it used to be. Some of the boss songs will actually have slight remixes to the original too. But the soundscape is very pleasant to the ears. There's not really any sound effect that you will feel gets annoying after a while or anything. Now, another thing I like to talk about in my reviews is replayability, and Metroid Prime is definitely worth playing again and again. See, after your first playthrough, you'll unlock hard mode, which is the only real way to play this game in the first place. But even if you don't end up playing on the harder difficulty, Metroid Prime is just so fun that I can't help myself but replay through it again and again. It's hard to believe a game this old still holds up today. But Metroid Prime is a solid, perfect 5 out of 5 score for me. Not only is this game incredibly fun, but mechanically, it does everything flawless. The fat has been completely trimmed from this game. leaving something that I can only describe as disgustingly clean and high quality. I could easily recommend this game to you on those merits alone, but to top it all off, this game is half the price of any other Nintendo Switch game. That is a steal. Now, in closing to any Metroid fans, apparently we're going to be getting a port of Metroid Prime 2 and 3 on the Switch. I don't know whether they're going to end up being full remasters, but at the very least, we are going to be able to play through 2 and 3 on the Switch at some point.